People often ask me why I never speak about my military service. They assume it's because of Afghanistan. What we did there, what we saw. They're wrong. Afghanistan was hell, but at least it was a hell I could understand. What happened during those 3 days in January 1980 was something else entirely. I've kept silent for over 40 years, but now that I've been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer, I find myself needing to unburden my soul before I join my comrades who didn't survive that journey. Maybe writing this will help me make sense of it all. Probably not. My name is Nikolai Petrov. In 1980, I was a corporal in the Soviet Army's 37th Motor Rifle Division stationed near Kiev. I had been in service for 2 years and had earned a reputation as a reliable soldier who followed orders without question. That's why, I assume, I was chosen for this mission, along with 5 others. It began on January 10th, one of the coldest nights I can remember. The kind of cold that makes your lungs ache and turns your breath into ice crystals before it even leaves your mouth. I was awakened at 0200 hours by our commanding officer, Major Leonid Barkov, a stern man with perpetually bloodshot eyes and a scar that ran from his left ear to the corner of his mouth. "Petrov," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Gather your things. You leave in 1 hour." He handed me a sealed envelope. "Read this only when you're in the truck. Burn it immediately after. This mission never happened. Do you understand?" I nodded, confused but trained not to question. As he turned to leave, he paused. "And Petrov, God help you if you fail." I dressed quickly and packed my essentials. In the courtyard, a ZIL-131 military truck was already running, its exhaust creating a fog in the frigid air. 5 other soldiers stood nearby, Sergei Volkov, our driver, and a veteran from Leningrad. Ivan Kuznetsov, a burly Ukrainian with hands like sledgehammers. The twins, Dmitry and Mikhail Sokolov, both silent and always watching. And finally, Lieutenant Alexei Karpov, who would be leading our mission. "Get in," Karpov ordered, his face expressionless. "We have a long journey ahead." The back of the truck was mostly empty, except for a large wooden crate in the center, approximately 2 meters long by 1 meter wide. It was reinforced with metal bands and had strange symbols, stenciled in red on its sides. The symbols weren't Russian or any language I recognized. Once we were all seated, Karpov locked the rear doors from the inside with a heavy padlock. He checked his watch. "Open your orders," he said. I broke the seal on my envelope and unfolded the single sheet inside. The orders were brief and terrifying. Rule number 1, transport sealed crate to Facility 4, 12 kilometers west of Pripyat, Chernobyl. Rule number 2, do not stop for any reason until you reach your destination. Rule number 3, do not open the crate under any circumstances. Rule number 4, if you hear noises from the crate, ignore them. They are not real. Rule number 5, if the crate begins to leak, apply the sealant provided immediately. Rule number 6, if anyone attempts to stop your vehicle, they are to be considered hostile. Rule number 7, if any member of the team becomes compromised, they must be left behind. At the bottom, in red ink, failure to follow these protocols will result in immediate execution. I looked up to see the others reading identical orders, their faces growing pale in the dim light of the truck. "Burn them," Karpov ordered. We used Sergei's lighter to set the papers aflame, watching as our orders, and whatever normalcy remained in our lives, turned to ash on the metal floor of the truck. Hello, viewers. If you wish your stories or experiences to be narrated by me, share them on our own subreddit, which you can join from the description below. I will pick the stories from the community and narrate them, and every once in a while, we will host a 3-hour story compilation. The engine roared, and we began our journey north, toward Chernobyl, with no idea what horror we were carrying or why we had been chosen to deliver it. The truck lurched forward as Sergei navigated through the empty streets of Kyiv. The city was still asleep, unaware of our presence or our cargo. Lieutenant Karpov sat across from me, his AK-47 resting across his lap, eyes fixed on the crate. The twins sat on either side of it, like sentinels. Ivan cleaned his knife methodically, the rhythmic scraping of metal against stone the only sound besides the rumble of the engine. "Anyone know what's in there?" Ivan finally asked, breaking the silence. "No questions," Karpov snapped. "The less you know, the better." But I had seen the look in Karpov's eyes when he'd read the orders. He was scared, and that scared me more than anything. We drove north through the Ukrainian countryside. The landscape was blanketed in snow, the skeletal trees reaching toward a sky heavy with more to come. I checked my watch. 0430 hours. The sun wouldn't rise for at least 3 more hours. That's when I first heard it. A faint scratching sound coming from inside the crate. So soft, I thought I might have imagined it. I glanced at the others to see if they had heard it too. The twins exchanged looks. Ivan's hand tightened around his knife. Karpov remained impassive, but a bead of sweat rolled down his temple despite the cold. The scratching grew louder, more insistent, then stopped. "Ignore it," Karpov said, repeating our orders. "It's not real." But it felt real. Too real. We continued in silence as the truck wound its way through narrow country roads. We were taking the long way, avoiding main highways and checkpoints. Protocol for sensitive transports. Around 0600 hours, Sergei slowed the truck. "Roadblock ahead," he called back through the small window connecting to the driver's cabin. Karpov moved to the window. "Military?" "Militia," Sergei replied. 3 men, 1 car. Karpov turned to us. "Remember the orders. Anyone who tries to stop us is hostile." My stomach nodded. These were likely just local police doing their job, but our orders were clear. Karpov handed each of us a small canister. "Put on your masks and be ready." I recognized the canisters. CS gas, powerful enough to incapacitate but not lethal. A small mercy. Sergei accelerated. I heard shouts, then a sharp crack as we burst through the flimsy wooden barrier. The truck swerved violently, and I grabbed a handhold to steady myself. There were more shouts, then the sound of gunfire. A single shot pinging off the truck's armor. Sergei didn't stop. "They're following," he called back. Karpov moved to the rear window. "Petrov, with me." I joined him at the back of the truck. Through the small, dirty window, I could see the militia car pursuing us, its headlights bright in the pre-dawn darkness. "On my mark," Karpov said, unlocking the rear door slightly. "Throw the gas and shut it immediately." He counted down, then swung the door open just enough. We tossed our canisters and slammed the door shut. Through the window, I watched the militia car swerve as clouds of gas enveloped it, then veer off the road into a snowbank. "Problem solved," Karpov said, but his voice lacked conviction. As we settled back into our seats, the crate made a new sound, not scratching this time, but a low, mournful moan, like a wounded animal. We all froze. "It's not real," Mikhail whispered, the first words I'd heard from either twin. But the moaning continued, rising in pitch, until it became a wail that set my teeth on edge. Then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. "Temperature's dropping," Sergei called from the front. He wasn't wrong. I could see my breath now, more pronounced than before. The metal floor of the truck felt like ice through my boots. That's when I noticed it. A thin trickle of dark liquid seeping from beneath the crate. It moved across the floor with deliberate slowness, as if it were alive. Ivan saw it too. "The crate is leaking." Karpov was on his feet immediately, retrieving a metal case from beneath his seat. He opened it to reveal several tubes of what looked like industrial sealant and a set of heavy rubber gloves. "Sokolov, Petrov, with me," he ordered. "The rest of you, move away from the crate." Dmitri and I put on the gloves while Karpov prepared the sealant. The liquid had stopped spreading, but formed a small puddle of what looked like oil, but smelled like copper and something else, something rotten. "Don't touch it with your skin," Karpov warned. "Apply the sealant to any seam where the liquid is escaping." We worked quickly, tracing the edges of the crate with the thick gray paste. When we reached the source of the leak, a hairline crack near one corner, the liquid seemed to recoil from the sealant, drawing back into the crate like a living thing retreating from a threat. Once we finished, Karpov inspected our work. "Good. Now clean up any residue on the floor. Use these." He handed us rags and a bottle of clear liquid that burned my nostrils even through the mask. As I wiped away the strange fluid, I swore it moved against the grain of the cloth, resistant to being removed. When the job was done, Karpov had us place the rags in a metal container, which he sealed and stowed beneath his seat. "We'll reach the Zhytomyr Oblast by noon," he said, checking his map. "From there, it's another 6 hours to the facility." "What's at the facility?" Ivan asked. Karpov's face hardened. "People who know how to handle this better than we do." Just then, the crate shuddered, a barely perceptible movement, but we all saw it. Then came a sound, 3 distinct taps, as if someone inside were knocking. Tap, tap, tap. We stared at each other, our faces masks of controlled terror. The rules echoed in my head. If you hear noises from the crate, ignore them. They are not real. But as we continued our journey through the desolate Ukrainian winter, one thought consumed me. What if they are? The sun had finally risen, casting weak light through a sky heavy with gray clouds. We'd been on the road for nearly 5 hours, the monotony broken only by the occasional sound from the crate. Scratching, tapping, and once, what sounded like whispered conversation in a language none of us recognized. As we approached the outskirts of Zhytomyr, Sergei slowed the truck. "Bridge ahead is washed out," he called back. "Need to detour through the city." Karpov frowned. "We're supposed to avoid populated areas." "No choice, Comrade Lieutenant," Sergei replied. "Unless you want to turn back and find another route. That would add 3 hours minimum." Karpov consulted his map, then checked his watch. "We're already behind schedule. Take us through, but stay on side streets when possible." The truck turned onto a narrow road that led into Zhytomyr. Unlike Kiev, the city was awake, its streets filled with people going about their daily lives. Workers trudged through snow toward factories. Old women carried bags of groceries. Children in thick coats played in the snow. Normal life. It seemed surreal after the tension of our journey. "Keep your weapons ready but out of sight," Karpov instructed. "We don't want to attract attention." We slowed to a crawl as we navigated the congested streets. Every minute felt excruciating. I kept my eyes fixed on the crate, half expecting it to burst open at any moment. The tapping had started again. Tap, 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 pause, tap, tap, tap. A pattern now, deliberate and insistent. Ivan leaned toward me. "It's Morse code," he whispered. Before I could respond, the truck jerked to a sudden stop, throwing us forward. "What's happening?" Karpov demanded. "Traffic accident ahead," Sergei called back. "Streets blocked." Karpov moved to the front. Through the windshield, I could see a crowd gathered around 2 vehicles that had collided at an intersection. Militia officers were directing traffic. "Find another route," Karpov ordered. "I'm trying," Sergei replied, frustration evident in his voice. "We're boxed in." We were stuck in the middle of a busy street, surrounded by curious civilians, and the crate was getting more active. The tapping had grown louder, more frantic. "It's saying, 'Help me,'" Ivan murmured, translating the Morse code. "Over over and over. "Help me." "Shut up," Karpov snapped. "Remember your orders. The sounds aren't real." But Ivan's face had gone pale. "What if there's someone in there? A prisoner?" "If there was," Karpov replied coldly. "Do you think they'd still be alive after all this time in a sealed box? Use your head, Kuznetsov." The twins exchanged glances again. Dmitri opened his mouth as if to speak, then thought better of it. Finally, Sergei managed to back the truck into a narrow alley, turning us around. "Found an alternate route," he announced, "but it'll take us through the center of the city." Karpov nodded grimly. "Just get us out of here." As we crawled through the heart of Zhytomyr, the crate suddenly went silent. The abrupt absence of sound was somehow more unnerving than the tapping had been. Then the temperature plummeted. In seconds, it was so cold that our breath crystallized before our faces and frost formed on the metal walls of the truck. The twins huddled together, their thin faces blue with cold. Ivan's massive frame shook with violent shivers. "What the hell?" Mikhail gasped, his teeth chattering. A thin layer of ice was spreading across the floor from beneath the crate, crackling as it expanded. The metal bands securing the crate began to strain against the wood, which was now coated in a layer of frost. "The sealant!" Karpov ordered, his voice tight with controlled panic. "Now!" We rushed to apply more sealant to the crate's seams. The substance struggled to adhere to the frozen wood, but we managed to force it into the cracks. As we worked, I noticed something strange. Small symbols were appearing in the frost on the crate's surface, forming and dissolving like breathing. "Done," I reported, my fingers numb despite the gloves. Karpov nodded but kept his eyes on the crate. "Everyone back to your positions." Slowly, the temperature began to normalize. The ice receded, melting into puddles on the truck's floor. But the symbols remained, now etched into the wood itself. Curved lines and sharp angles that hurt my eyes if I looked at them too long. We continued through Zhytomyr in tense silence. Just as we were reaching the northern outskirts, a militia checkpoint appeared ahead. "Official inspection point," Sergei reported. "Can't avoid it without attracting suspicion." Karpov turned to us. "Let me handle this. Say nothing unless directly addressed. Remember Rule 6. The truck stopped at the checkpoint. A militia officer approached the driver's side. Through the small window, I could hear him asking Sergei for papers. "Military transport," Sergei replied, handing over documents. "Priority clearance." The officer examined the papers, then walked around to the back of the truck. There was a sharp knock on the rear doors. Karpov gestured for us to be still, then opened the door slightly, positioning himself to block any view of the crate. "Good morning, Comrade Lieutenant," the officer said, trying to peer around Karpov. "Routine inspection. Need to see what you're carrying." "Not possible," Karpov replied firmly. "Classified military cargo. Here's our authorization." He handed the officer another document. The man studied it with a frown. "This all seems in order, but regulations still require a visual inspection." "I understand," Karpov said, his voice softening slightly. "But surely you understand the nature of state security. This cargo is sealed for a reason." He lowered his voice. "It's for the nuclear facility. Very sensitive materials." The officer hesitated, then nodded slowly. "Very well, but I need to log the vehicle details." As he moved away to record our information, Ivan leaned toward Karpov. "That was too easy," he whispered. Karpov said nothing, but his hand moved to his sidearm. The officer returned a few minutes later. "You're clear to proceed, Comrade Lieutenant." Then he added almost casually, "The Pripyat road has been closed due to weather conditions. You'll need to take the eastern route through Korostin." Karpov nodded. "Thank you for the information." The officer stepped back, and Sergei started the engine. As we pulled away from the checkpoint, Karpov kept his eyes on the rearview mirror. "He's on the radio. he observed quietly. Could be routine, Dmitri suggested. Or he could be reporting us, Mikhail countered. Karpov made a decision. Sergei, once we're out of sight, take the western route as planned. Ignore what he said about the road closure. Yes, Comrade Lieutenant. We drove in silence for several kilometers. No one pursued us. Gradually, the city gave way to pine forests and snow-covered fields. The respite was short-lived. A new sound emerged from the crate. A soft, melodic humming. A lullaby, I realized with a chill. One my mother used to sing to me when I was a child in Smolensk. How could it know that? The humming grew louder, the tune shifting to something else now. The Soviet national anthem, but distorted, played at the wrong tempo and in a minor key that made it sound like a funeral dirge. Ivan crossed himself, an old habit that could have earned him a reprimand in other circumstances. Karpov pretended not to notice. We're making good time, he announced, checking his watch. Should reach the facility by 1800 hours if we maintain this pace. None of us responded. We were all listening to the crate as it continued its eerie concert, cycling through songs we each knew, personal songs, childhood melodies, tunes that should have been known only to us. Private memories turned into a mocking serenade. Then came a new sound, laughter. A child's laughter, innocent and carefree. It echoed in the confined space of the truck, bouncing off the metal walls until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. My daughter, Sergei whispered from the driver's seat, his voice breaking. That's my Natasha's laugh. The truck swerved suddenly, then stabilized. Keep driving, Karpov ordered sharply. Eyes on the road. But, Sergei began. It's not real, Karpov interrupted. None of it is real. Remember that. But I could see in their eyes that none of them believed it anymore. Whatever was in that crate knew us, knew our fears, our memories, our loves, and it was using them against us. As we continued our journey north toward Chernobyl, the child's laughter faded, replaced by a sound that chilled me to my core. The steady, rhythmic beat of a human heart. The heartbeat continued for nearly an hour, a relentless metronome that seemed to synchronize with our own hearts until I couldn't tell which was mine and which came from the crate. Then, like everything else, it eventually stopped, leaving us in blessed silence. We need fuel, Sergei announced as we passed a weathered sign that read, Korostin, 15 kilometers. Tanks below quarter. Karpov checked his map. There's a military depot in Korostin. We'll refuel there. With respect, Comrade Lieutenant, Sergei replied. I don't think we can make it that far. Been burning more fuel than normal in this cold. Karpov considered this. Alternatives? There's a village about 3 kilometers ahead, Radsha. Small place, but should have a fuel depot for agricultural vehicles. Karpov didn't like it, I could tell, but he nodded. Make it quick. As we approached Radsha, something felt wrong. The village came into view, a cluster of modest wooden houses and a few larger buildings, including what looked like a community center with the requisite Lenin statue out front. But there were no lights, no smoke from chimneys, no sign of life despite the time of day. Where is everyone? Mikhail murmured. Sergei slowed the truck as we entered the main street. Looks abandoned. Keep driving, Karpov ordered. Find the fuel depot and let's get out of here. We moved slowly through the empty village. Windows stared back at us like hollow eyes. Doors hung open, swinging gently in the winter breeze. In the village square, a red banner proclaimed, Glory to Soviet labor, over the empty market stalls. There. Ivan pointed to a small depot at the village edge with several large fuel tanks. Sergei parked beside them. I'll need help with the refueling. Kuznetsov, go with him, Karpov ordered. The rest of you, stay alert. Ivan and Sergei exited the truck. Through the small window, I watched them approach the fuel tanks, their breath clouding in the frigid air. They seemed impossibly vulnerable outside our metal cocoon. The crate chose that moment to resume its performance. This time it was voices, multiple voices speaking simultaneously in whispers, too low to make out individual words. The collective murmuring created a sound like rushing water or wind through leaves. "What are they saying?" Dmitri asked, leaning closer despite himself. "Nothing," Karpov snapped. "They're saying nothing because they're not real." But I was listening, and in the susurration of phantom voices, certain words became clear. Village. Death. Watch. A sharp rapping on the truck made us all jump. Sergei's face appeared at the window. "Fuel pumps are locked. Need to find the key or break them open." Karpov cursed under his breath. "How long will that take?" "Depends on if we find the key. Office building is over there." Sergei pointed to a small structure beside the depot. Karpov made a decision. "Sokolov twins, go with them. Find that key. Petrov, you're with me guarding the crate. And hurry. I want to be gone in 15 minutes. The twins climbed out, and I watched the four of them cross to the small office building, their boots crunching in the snow. The moment they disappeared inside, the whispering from the crate grew louder, more insistent. "Trap. Coming. Hide." I turned to Karpov. "Lieutenant, I think we should—" "Shut up," he hissed, raising his hand. He was listening, but not to the crate. "You hear that?" At first, I heard nothing beyond the whispering. Then I caught it, the distant rumble of engines, multiple engines. Karpov moved to the rear window. Vehicles approaching from the south. At least 3, maybe 4. My pulse quickened. "The militia from the checkpoint?" "Possibly." His face was grim. "Or worse." "What's worse than the militia?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. Karpov's eyes met mine. "The people who want what's in this crate." The rumbling grew louder. Karpov grabbed his rifle. "We need to warn the others." Before he could move, the office door burst open, and Sergei sprinted toward us, the twins and even close behind. "Got it!" Sergei shouted, holding up a key. Then he heard the engines. "What's that?" "Trouble," Karpov replied as they climbed back into the truck. "How fast can you fuel up?" 5 minutes, minimum, Sergei estimated. "We don't have 5 minutes. Start the truck." Karpov's voice was ice. "But the fuel..." "Now, comrade." Sergei jumped into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine coughed, sputtered, then died. He tried again with the same result. "What's happening?" Karpov demanded. "Don't know," Sergei replied, panic edging into his voice. "It was fine earlier." The rumble of approaching vehicles was much closer now. Karpov made a tactical assessment. "Everyone out. We'll take defensive positions. Petrov, Dmitri, bring the sealant kit." "What about the crate?" Ivan asked. "Leave it. We'll protect it from outside." We grabbed our weapons and equipment and exited the truck, taking cover behind the fuel tanks and empty barrels. Just in time. 3 UAZ 469 military jeeps rounded the corner, followed by a larger ZIL truck similar to our own. They weren't militia. The men who emerged wore the uniform of KGB border guards, each armed with an AK-47. 8 in total. They spread out in a practiced formation, covering all angles. A 9th man stepped from the lead vehicle. Tall and lean with prematurely gray hair, despite his relatively young face, he wore a colonel's uniform with KGB insignia. "Lieutenant Karpov," he called out. "This is Colonel Vasilyev, KGB Special Directorate. You and your men are to stand down immediately." Karpov remained hidden, signaling for us to hold our positions. "We know you're here, Lieutenant," Vasilyev continued. "Your truck is clearly visible. There's nowhere to run." "What do we do?" Mikhail whispered. Karpov's face was unreadable. "Wait. You have something that belongs to us," Vasilyev shouted. something that should never have been given to regular Army personnel, a mistake we're here to correct. One of the KGB men began moving toward our truck. "Last warning," Karpov muttered, then raised his voice. "That's far enough, Colonel. We have orders to deliver this cargo to Facility 4. Anyone who interferes is to be considered hostile." Vasilyev smiled. It never reached his eyes. "Admirable dedication, Lieutenant. But your orders have been countermanded. The cargo is to be redirected to Moscow immediately. Stand down, and there will be no consequences for you or your men." "He's lying," Ivan whispered. "They'll shoot us all." I believed him. The KGB didn't leave loose ends, especially not with whatever classified operation this was. "Show me the new orders," Karpov demanded. "Come out and I'll show you," Vasilyev replied. Stalemate. Then, from inside our truck came a new sound, a high-pitched keening that set my teeth on edge. It grew in intensity until the windows of the truck began to vibrate. Several of the KGB men covered their ears, their faces contorted in pain. "Secure the crate now," Vasilyev shouted, all pretense of negotiation gone. His men rushed toward our truck. Karpov gave the order. "Fire!" What followed was chaos. Gunfire erupted from both sides. I ducked behind a fuel tank, returning fire when I could. Beside me, Dmitri took a bullet to the shoulder, crying out in pain. His twin pulled him to safety behind a concrete barrier. The firefight lasted less than a minute. 2 KGB men were down, and Ivan had taken a grazing wound to his leg. Then came a lull as both sides reloaded and reassessed. That's when I noticed it, a thin black liquid seeping from under the truck, moving with purpose across the snow. The same substance that had leaked from the crate earlier, but much more of it now. It spread in multiple directions, forming intricate patterns that reminded me of neural networks or river deltas. One tendril of the substance reached a fallen KGB soldier. Upon contact, the man's body convulsed violently, then went still. Another tendril approached one of the KGB jeeps, climbing up its tire and disappearing underneath. Vasilyev saw it too. "Fall back," he ordered his men. "Secure the perimeter." The strange fluid continued to spread, accelerating now, branching in all directions. Wherever it touched, metal corroded and organic material blackened. It reached another KGB soldier who wasn't quick enough to retreat. The man screamed as the substance climbed his leg, his skin visibly degrading where it touched. "The sealant," Karpov shouted to me over the commotion. "We need to contain it." But there was too much of it now, spreading too quickly. The truck itself was beginning to deteriorate where the substance pooled beneath it, the metal bubbling and warping. Then the keening sound changed, becoming deeper, more resonant. The ground beneath us trembled. From inside the truck came a sharp crack, like wood splintering under enormous pressure. "It's breaking free," Mikhail whispered in horror. Vasilyev shouted something to his men. 3 of them ran to their truck, returning with what looked like a flamethrower. "No!" Karpov yelled. "You don't know what you're dealing with." But the KGB colonel was beyond listening. He gave a curt nod, and the soldier with the flamethrower opened fire on the spreading black substance. The fluid ignited instantly, but instead of burning away, the flames turned an unnatural purple, then blue, spreading along the tendrils of the substance even faster than before. One of the fuel tanks caught fire. "Take cover!" I screamed, diving behind the concrete barrier where the twins had sheltered. The explosion rocked the entire village, a massive fireball blooming into the winter sky. The shockwave shattered windows and sent debris flying in all directions. When I dared to look again, our truck was engulfed in purple-blue flames, the metal hideously distorted as if it were melting. And rising from the inferno was a figure, or not quite a figure, but a shape that suggested one. A darkness deeper than the smoke, with proportions that hurt my mind to look upon directly. It hovered briefly above the burning truck, then shot upward into the sky, moving with impossible speed until it vanished among the clouds. In its wake, the unnatural flames died almost immediately, leaving only normal fire consuming what remained of our truck and the fuel depot. What was that? I gasped, my ears ringing from the explosion. Karpov's face was ashen. What we were supposed to contain, he said quietly, and what we've just set free. The silence that followed was broken only by the crackling of flames and the groans of the wounded. The snow around us had melted in a perfect circle extending 15 meters in every direction from what remained of our truck. Where the black substance had touched, nothing grew. Not even bacteria, I would later learn. "Mikhail, status report," Karpov ordered, his voice hoarse from smoke. "Dimitri's wounded but stable," Mikhail replied, pressing a makeshift bandage to his twin's shoulder. Ivan took a round to the leg. Sergei. He didn't need to finish. I could see Sergei's body lying near the burning husk of our truck, half consumed by the strange fire. He'd been closest to the explosion. "And the KGB?" Karpov asked. I scanned the area. 3 confirmed dead. Don't see Vasilyev or the others. As if summoned by his name, Vasilyev's voice cut through the crackling flames. "Lieutenant Karpov, come out now or I execute your men one by one." We peered over our cover to see the KGB colonel standing by his intact jeep. He had Mikhail's AK-47 pointed at the back of his head. 2 of his remaining men covered us with their weapons. Karpov's face hardened. "You have no idea what you've done, Colonel." "What I've done?" Vasilyev laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "It was your incompetence that allowed the asset to escape. Now come out, or I'll put a bullet in this man's skull." Karpov calculated his options, then slowly stood, hands raised. "Let my men go, Colonel." They were following my orders. I grabbed his sleeve. "Lieutenant." "That's an order, Petrov," he said quietly. "Live to fight another day." As Karpov walked toward Vasilyev, something strange happened. The air around the KGB colonel began to waver, like heat rising from pavement on a summer day. But this was different, more localized, more deliberate. Vasilyev didn't notice, his attention fixed on Karpov. But his men did, their eyes widening as they looked at something just behind their commander. "Sir," one of them began, his voice shaking. "Silence!" Vasilyev snapped, never taking his eyes off Karpov. Then I saw it too, a darkness gathering behind Vasilyev, coalescing into that same impossible shape we'd seen rise from the burning truck. But smaller now, more defined, more purposeful. "Colonel," Karpov said, stopping several meters away. "You need to listen carefully. What we were transporting. I know exactly what you were transporting." Vasilyev interrupted. "An asset recovered from the Tunguska site last year. A biological weapon of immense potential." Karpov shook his head slowly. "Not a weapon, Colonel. At least, not one of ours." The darkness behind Vasilyev solidified further, taking on a form that resembled a human silhouette. But wrong. Proportions distorted, limbs too long, head misshapen. One of Vasilyev's men dropped his weapon, crossing himself in terror. "What are you staring at?" Vasilyev demanded, finally sensing something amiss. He began to turn. "I wouldn't do that," Karpov warned quietly. Too late. Vasilyev found himself face to face with the entity. He froze, his eyes widening in primal terror. The colonel's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. The entity reached out with what might have been a hand, touching Vasilyev's face with terrible gentleness. And then, impossibly, the colonel began to fold in on himself. Not physically, his body remained intact, but something essential seemed to collapse inward, like a piece of paper crumpling into a tight ball. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites, and a thin trickle of the black substance leaked from his ears, nose, and the corners of his eyes. His men broke, fleeing toward the remaining jeep. The entity made no move to pursue them. Instead, it turned its attention to Karpov, who stood his ground despite visible terror. "We were taking you where you wanted to go," Karpov said, addressing the entity directly. "To Facility 4. To Chernobyl, like the agreement specified." The entity tilted what passed for its head, as if considering Karpov's words. Then it spoke, not aloud, but directly into our minds. The sensation was like ice water being poured into my skull, freezing every thought it touched. The vessel was damaged, insufficient. Karpov winced but maintained eye contact with the thing. "We can find you another. Let us help you reach your destination." "You were never meant to survive the journey." The entity drifted closer to Karpov. I could see him trembling with the effort to stand his ground. "Lieutenant," I called out, unsure what I intended to do, but knowing I couldn't just watch. The entity's attention swiveled to me, and the full force of its presence hit like a physical blow. I fell to my knees, blood trickling from my nose as images flooded my mind, stars wheeling in unfamiliar configurations, vast structures on barren worlds, beings of light and darkness engaged in a war that had raged since before Earth existed. Witness. With that single word, I understood what the entity was. Not a weapon, but a messenger. An envoy from something vast and ancient that had been watching humanity for millennia, waiting for us to reach a certain threshold. And now, with our growing nuclear capabilities, we had finally attracted its full attention. The entity returned its focus to Karpov. "You will still serve." Karpov's body went rigid. The black substance began to seep from the ground around him, climbing his boots, his legs, his torso, until he was completely encased. For a moment, the lieutenant's eyes met mine, filled with terror and resignation. Then the substance contracted violently, and where Karpov had stood was only a perfect sphere of the black material, hovering a meter above the ground. The sphere rose, joining the entity. Together they ascended into the gray winter sky, until they were lost from view. I don't know how long I knelt there, bleeding from my nose and ears, before Ivan's voice cut through my stupor. "Petrov! The jeep!" The KGB men had started their vehicle and were speeding away. Our only means of escape was disappearing. Despite my dizziness, I staggered to my feet. Ivan was already moving, dragging his wounded leg toward the road. Mikhail followed, supporting his brother. "We'll never catch them on foot," Mikhail said, despair in his voice. "We don't need to," I replied, pointing to the other side of the village where the second KGB jeep sat abandoned, its driver among the dead. We made our way to the vehicle. The keys were still in the ignition. "Can you drive with that leg?" I asked Ivan. He nodded grimly. "Don't have much choice, do I?" We helped Dmitri into the back seat, his face pale from blood loss. Mikhail sat with him, applying pressure to his wound. I took the passenger seat as Ivan started the engine. "Where do we go?" he asked. "Back to base?" I considered our options. Going back meant facing questions we couldn't answer, possibly court-martial or worse. The mission was compromised, our cargo lost, our commanding officer gone. But I also knew we couldn't just run. Not with what I'd seen in those visions. Not with what was still out there. "Chernobyl," I said finally. "We go to Facility 4. "Are you insane?" Mikhail protested. "After what just happened?" "You didn't see what I saw," I replied, my voice steady despite the lingering pain in my head. "Whatever that thing is, it's going to Chernobyl for a reason. And I think that reason involves a lot of people dying." Ivan studied my face, then nodded. "Chernobyl it is." As we drove away from the burning remains of Radsha, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were now part of something much larger and more terrible than we could comprehend. The rules of our mission had changed. Now we had just one: stop what was coming, or die trying. The first snowflakes of a new storm began to fall as we headed north toward Chernobyl, toward whatever fate awaited us there. The storm intensified as we drove north, fat snowflakes reducing visibility to mere meters. Ivan hunched over the steering wheel, his knuckles white with tension. The headlights illuminated a swirling white void ahead, the road barely visible. We moved at a crawl, the windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the accumulating snow. In the back seat, Dimitri's condition worsened. His breathing had become shallow, his skin clammy and gray. "He needs a doctor," Mikhail said, the worry evident in his voice. "Next village," Ivan promised, though we all knew a rural Ukrainian clinic would have little to offer for a gunshot wound. The visions the entity had forced into my mind continued to surface in fragments, glimpses of vast, impossible architectures, beings of pure energy locked in combat across the void of space, a shadow falling across Earth, darkening Moscow, Kyiv, New York, Beijing. And at the center of it all, a pulsing core of power that I somehow knew was located beneath the Chernobyl nuclear plant. "There's something there," I said aloud. "Something buried under Reactor 4. Something that's been there for, I don't know, maybe thousands of years." "What are you talking about?" Mikhail demanded. "The entity showed me. It's going to Chernobyl because there's something it wants there. Something important." Ivan glanced at me. "You believe what that thing put in your head?" "I don't have a choice," I replied. "You didn't see what I saw." The road curved around a dense pine forest, then opened to reveal a small collection of buildings huddled against the storm. A village smaller than Racha, barely a hamlet. "There," Ivan said, pointing to a building with a faded red cross painted on its side. He parked directly in front of the clinic. Together we carried Dimitri inside. The building was dimly lit, heated by a wood stove that radiated blessed warmth after the freezing jeep. An elderly doctor looked up from his desk, startled by our sudden entrance. His eyes widened at the sight of our uniforms, then narrowed at the blood-soaked bandage on Dimitri's shoulder. "What happened?" he asked, already moving to clear a treatment table. "Accident during training exercise," I lied smoothly. "Bullet wound, through and through." The doctor gave me a look that said he didn't believe me, but wouldn't press the issue. "Put him here." We laid Dimitri on the table. The doctor cut away his uniform to reveal the wound, angry and red, but clean. "Lucky," he pronounced. "Missed the major vessels." He turned to a cabinet withdrawing supplies. "I can clean and stitch this, give antibiotics, but he cannot travel for at least 2 days." "We don't have 2 days," I said. The doctor glanced up sharply. "Then he may lose the arm, or worse." Mikhail's face hardened. "I'm staying with my brother." "No," Dimitri's voice was weak but determined. He pushed himself up on his good arm. "The mission. We finish it together." The doctor pushed him back down. "Lie still if you want to live, young man." "Treat him," I told the doctor. "We'll discuss our options." Ivan and I stepped away while the doctor worked, Mikhail hovering close to his twin. "We can't leave them," Ivan said quietly. "We can't take them either," I countered. "Not where we're going." "And where exactly is that?" "You still haven't explained what you think is happening." I struggled to organize the chaotic images in my head. There's a facility beneath Chernobyl, not ours, not human at all. It's been there for thousands of years, dormant, and now something's woken it up, or is trying to. Ivan looked skeptical, and you know this because the entity showed me. It's a messenger, sent to activate the facility, and what happens after that? I shuddered, remembering the shadow falling across the planet. Nothing good. So, we're going to stop it? Just the two of us? We have to try. There's a KGB special unit at Facility 4 that deals with these anomalies. If we can reach them, warn them. Ivan studied my face. You believe this, don't you? with every fiber of my being. He sighed, then nodded once. All right, but we need supplies, a proper map, and I need something for this leg. While the doctor finished treating Dmitri, we raided the clinic's supplies, bandages, antiseptics, painkillers. The doctor protested at first, then relented when I explained we were on a mission vital to state security. There's a military exclusion zone around the nuclear plant, he told us as he rebandaged Ivan's leg. Very tight security. You'll need proper authorization to get through. We have it, I lied, pocketing the KGB identification we'd taken from Vasilyev's body. It wouldn't stand up to close scrutiny, but it might get us past the first checkpoint. An hour later, Dmitri was stabilized, his wound properly cleaned and stitched. The doctor had given him antibiotics and a shot for the pain. He stays here, the doctor insisted, at least overnight. I looked at Mikhail, torn between duty and compassion. His expression was resolute. I'm staying with my brother. I knew I couldn't force him to come, and in truth, it would only slow us down. Take care of him, I said. If we're not back in 48 hours. I know, Mikhail replied grimly. May God be with you. Outside, the storm had intensified, transforming the landscape into a howling white void. Ivan struggled to start the jeep, the engine protesting against the cold. If we get stuck in this, he shouted over the wind, we're dead. If we don't reach Facility 4, I shouted back, we're all dead anyway. The engine finally caught, and we pulled away from the clinic, the headlights barely penetrating the swirling snow. I checked my watch, 1,700 hours. We'd been on the road for 15 hours, with at least 2 more to go in these conditions. As we crawled northward, the storm gradually began to ease, the wall of white finning to reveal glimpses of the landscape. Barren fields stretched to either side, occasionally broken by stands of skeletal trees or abandoned collective farm buildings. Almost to the exclusion zone, Ivan noted, consulting a map he'd found in the Jeep's glove compartment. Checkpoint should be just ahead. I checked the KGB identification again. Let me handle the talking. Follow my lead. The checkpoint appeared out of the gloom, a barrier across the road, a small guard post, and 2 soldiers huddled in heavy winter gear. They straightened as our headlights illuminated them, one stepping forward with his hand raised. Ivan stopped the Jeep. I rolled down my window, letting in a blast of frigid air. Identification, the guard demanded. I handed over Vasilyev's papers. Colonel Vasilyev, KGB Special Directorate. We're expected at Facility 4. The guard examined the papers, then studied my face. You're not Vasilyev. My heart sank. No, I'm his adjutant, Petrov. The colonel sent us ahead while he deals with a situation in Radcha. The guard's eyes narrowed. What situation? Classified. You can radio your superiors if you like, but I should warn you that interfering with a priority black operation carries severe consequences. The bluff was a gamble. I had no idea if priority black was even a real designation, but it sounded appropriately ominous. The guard hesitated, clearly weighing his options. Finally, he handed back the papers. I'll need to call this in. Of course, I agreed, affecting an air of impatience. But be quick about it. We're already behind schedule. The guard retreated to his post. Through the window, I could see him speaking into a radio, occasionally glancing our way. This isn't going to work, Ivan muttered. It might, I whispered back. Just be ready to move quickly if it doesn't. The guard returned, his expression now deferential. You're cleared to proceed, comrade. Follow the main road to the facility entrance. They're expecting you. I kept my relief hidden behind a curt nod. Open the gate. The barrier lifted, and we drove through. Once we were out of sight of the checkpoint, Ivan let out a long breath. That was too easy. They probably confirmed there was a Colonel Vasilyev on an operation in this area. He's high enough rank that the guard wouldn't question his adjutant too closely. Or they know exactly who we are and are leading us into a trap. I couldn't argue with that logic. Just drive faster. The landscape changed as we entered the exclusion zone proper. The scattered farms gave way to dense pine forest, the trees heavy with snow. Signs appeared at regular intervals, warning of restricted access and severe penalties for trespassing. The road narrowed, becoming little more than a cleared path through the wilderness. After another 30 minutes, the forest thinned, revealing the first glimpses of Pripyat in the distance, a cluster of rectangular apartment blocks rising from the snowy plains like gray marmaliths. Beyond them, barely visible in the fading light, loomed the massive cooling tower of the Chernobyl nuclear plant. "There it is," Ivan murmured. A strange sensation washed over me as we approached, a pressure in my ears, a tingling along my skin. The visions returned, stronger now, more coherent. I saw the entity again, but this time it wasn't alone. Karpov was with it, or something wearing Karpov's shape, moving through the forests ahead of us toward the same destination. "They're already here," I said, the certainty settling like a stone in my gut. "Who?" Ivan asked. "The entity, and Karpov, or what used to be Karpov." Ivan glanced at me, concern in his eyes. "What's happening to you, Nikolai?" "I don't know," I admitted. "It's like the closer we get, the more I can see. Like it's reaching out to me." "The entity?" I shook my head. "Number something else. Something beneath the reactor." The pressure increased as we drove closer to Pripyat, becoming almost painful. Random images flashed through my mind, blueprints for the nuclear plant, but with strange alterations. Tunnels extending deep beneath the official structure, a chamber directly under Reactor 4, containing something that pulsed with otherworldly energy. And then, without warning, our Jeep died. The engine cut out, the headlights flickered and went dark, plunging us into the early winter twilight. "What now?" Ivan demanded, trying in vain to restart the vehicle. I stepped out of the Jeep, my boots crunching in the fresh snow. The air was utterly still, the silence absolute. No wind, no distant sounds of the facility, nothing. Just vast, oppressive silence. Above us, the clouds had parted, revealing a sky painted in deepening shades of purple and crimson. But something was wrong with the stars just beginning to appear. They seemed to shimmer and shift, their patterns unfamiliar, as if we were looking at a different sky altogether. "Ivan," I said quietly. "Look up." He joined me, his breath catching as he observed the same phenomenon. "What is that?" Before I could answer, a low humming began. Not from any direction I could identify, but seeming to emanate from the ground beneath our feet, from the air around us, from within our own bodies. The sound grew in intensity, vibrating through my bones, my teeth, my skull. Then came a light, a sharp, blue-white beam shooting straight up from the direction of the nuclear plant, piercing the strange sky. The beam widened, brightened, until it was painful to look at directly. "It's starting," I whispered. "God help us all, it's starting." The humming changed pitch, becoming a wailing siren that seemed to call to something beyond the stars. And in that moment, I knew with absolute certainty what was happening. "They're opening a door," I said, my voice strange even to my own ears. "And we're the only ones left who can close it." We abandoned the dead Jeep and proceeded on foot toward the pulsing blue light. The snow was knee-deep in places, hampering our progress. Ivan struggled with his wounded leg, but refused my offers of support. The cold was brutal, seeping through our uniforms despite the layers beneath. "What's the plan when we get there?" Ivan asked, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. I had no answer. The visions provided glimpses of what was happening, but no clear path to stopping it. We find whoever's in charge of Facility 4, tell them what we know. And if they're already compromised, like Karpov, it was a possibility I'd considered. Then we do what we can on our own. We trudged in silence for another kilometer before reaching the outskirts of Pripyat. The workers' city was eerily quiet, its apartment blocks looming like sentinels in the twilight. No lights shone from any window. No smoke rose from any chimney. "Where is everyone?" Ivan whispered. I knew without knowing how. Evacuated, or worse. The blue beam dominated the sky ahead, its light casting everything in an unnatural glow. As we drew closer to the plant, we began to see signs of recent activity. Vehicle tracks in the snow, footprints, equipment left behind in haste. And then, more disturbing evidence. Dark stains in the snow that could only be blood. A military boot with something still inside it. Deep gouges in the walls of buildings, as if something with massive claws had raked across them. "Something's been hunting here," Ivan observed grimly. The pressure in my head had become nearly unbearable, the visions coming in rapid, disorienting flashes. I saw soldiers firing futilely at shapes that seemed to phase in and out of existence. Scientists in radiation suits working frantically at control panels. Tunnels beneath the reactor glowing with unearthly light, and always, the entity, now joined by others of its kind, moving purposefully towards something ancient and powerful. We reached the perimeter fence of the nuclear plant. The gate hung open, the guardhouse empty. Beyond it, the famous cooling tower and reactor building stood silhouetted against the beam of light, which we could now see originated from Reactor 4 itself. There. I pointed to a low concrete structure to the right of the main complex, partially hidden by the larger buildings. Unlike the other structures, it bore no identifying markings, no windows, just a heavy steel door secured by a keypad lock. Facility 4, Ivan guessed. As we approached the door, a new sound cut through the humming of the beam, a high-pitched whine of stressed metal, then a deep, resonant boom that I felt in my chest more than heard with my ears. "That came from inside the reactor," Ivan said, alarmed. Another boom, louder than the first. The ground beneath our feet trembled. The blue beam flickered, then stabilized, now pulsing with a rhythmic intensity that matched the pressure waves in my skull. We reached the door of Facility 4. The keypad lock had been smashed, the heavy door dented from the inside, as if something had tried to force its way out. It stood ajar by a few centimeters. Ivan readied his weapon. I did the same, though I doubted bullets would be effective against whatever awaited us. With a nod to each other, we pulled the door open and entered. A narrow corridor stretched before us, illuminated by emergency lighting that bathed everything in a dull red glow. The walls were concrete, unmarked except for radiation hazard symbols at regular intervals. The air smelled of ozone and something else, a metallic tang that reminded me of the black substance from the crate. We moved cautiously down the corridor, our boots echoing despite our attempts at stealth. At the end was another door, this one hanging from a single hinge. Beyond it lay what appeared to be a control room, banks of computers and monitoring equipment, most dark now, a few still flickering with life. And bodies, at least a dozen, scattered across the room in positions that suggested they'd been trying to flee. Some wore lab coats, others military uniforms. All had the same terrible wounds. Skin blackened and desiccated as if all moisture had been forcibly extracted from their bodies. Eyes sunken into their skulls, mouths frozen in silent screams. "My God," Ivan whispered. What happened to them? I knew. The visions showed me these people's final moments, their desperate attempt to contain what had already broken free, their realization that they were facing something beyond human comprehension. Their deaths had been quick but excruciating, their life essence consumed by the entities. "We're too late," I said, the certainty of it settling over me like a shroud. But even as I spoke, I noticed one of the bodies move. Just a slight stirring, a trembling hand. Ivan saw it too. We rushed to the figure, a middle-aged man in a colonel's uniform, propped against a console. His skin was gray, his breathing shallow, but he was alive. "Water," he croaked. Ivan produced a canteen, helping the man take small sips. The colonel's eyes were unfocused at first, then gradually sharpened as they settled on our faces. "Who?" he managed. "Corporal Nikolai Petrov," I said. 37th Motor Rifle Division. This is Senior Sergeant Ivan Kuznetsov. We were part of the transport team." Recognition flickered in the colonel's eyes. "The crate. You lost it." "It broke free," I corrected. "Near Raksha. We followed it here." The colonel coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Too late. They've already activated the conduit." "What conduit? What is this place?" "Facility 4. Special Research Division. We study anomalies, things that shouldn't exist, but do." Another coughing fit seized him. When it passed, there was blood on his lips. "The artifact under Reactor 4. We discovered it during construction in '76. Ancient, predates human civilization by millions of years." "What does it do?" Ivan pressed. "It's a beacon, a signal device, designed to call them." "Who?" The colonel's eyes met mine. "You've seen them, in your mind. They showed you." I nodded, unsettled by his knowledge of my visions. "They've been watching us, since we split the atom, waiting for us to reach a certain point. The reactor, it wasn't built here by accident. They influenced Soviet planners, subtly guided the decision to build it directly above the artifact." "Why?" I asked, though I feared I already knew the answer. "Power, the reactor. Its energy signature activates the artifact, creates a doorway." "A doorway to where?" The colonel's face contorted in pain. "To them, their world. They're coming to claim what they believe is theirs." Another tremor shook the facility, stronger than before. Dust and small chunks of concrete rained down from the ceiling. "How do we stop it?" I demanded. The colonel's laugh was bitter, ending in another bloody cough. "You can't. We tried. Tried everything. Explosives, radiation, even an electromagnetic pulse generator. Nothing affected the artifact. It's impervious." "There has to be a way," Ivan insisted. The colonel's eyes were growing dim, his breathing more labored. "There is one possibility. The reactor itself, if it were to catastrophically fail." "A meltdown?" I asked, horrified. "You're suggesting we cause a nuclear meltdown?" "Theoretically, the right kind of meltdown would generate a unique energy signature. Might disrupt the conduit, collapse the doorway." His voice was barely audible now. "In the safe emergency protocols, code is 71942 double quote." He gestured weakly toward a wall, safe, partially hidden behind a fallen cabinet. Then his eyes fixed on something beyond us, widening in terror. "They're here," he whispered. We spun around to see a figure standing in the doorway, Lieutenant Karpov, or what had once been him. His body stood unnaturally still, eyes completely black, skin waxy and pale. When he spoke, his voice was layered with others, creating a discordant chorus that hurt my ears. "You cannot stop what has begun." Behind me, the colonel gasped his final breath. Ivan raised his rifle, but I put a hand on his arm. "Don't. It won't help." The thing that had been Karpov tilted its head, studying us with those bottomless black eyes. "Why have you followed?" "Your function was complete." "We were supposed to deliver the crate," I said, forcing myself to meet its gaze. "To Facility 4. That was our mission." "Your mission was to die. All witnesses must be eliminated." Another tremor shook the building, more violent than the last. Alarms began to sound from the few functioning systems in the control room. You will witness the arrival, the Karpov thing continued. A privilege few of your kind will share. What will happen to the people here? To humanity? Ivan demanded. A smile spread across Karpov's face. Too wide, too many teeth. Integration, elevation. Those who serve willingly will be transformed. The others, harvested. With that, the entity turned and walked away, its movements too fluid to be human. The safe, I reminded Ivan, once we were alone. We moved the fallen cabinet and found the wall safe. I entered the code the colonel had given us, 71942. The lock disengaged with a soft click. Inside was a single folder marked Protocol Omega and a key card. I opened the folder, scanning its contents quickly. The emergency protocol was exactly what the colonel had described. A procedure to induce a specific type of reactor failure that would generate an energy pulse capable of disrupting the artifact's conduit. This is insane, Ivan said, reading over my shoulder. We'd be irradiating half of Ukraine. Thousands would die. Millions will die if we don't, I countered. You heard what it said. Harvested. Another violent tremor, the longest yet. Through the door, we could see the blue beam intensifying, now so bright it illuminated the entire facility like midday. We need to get to the main reactor control room, I said, studying the facility map included in the folder. It's in the administration building, connected to Reactor 4. Ivan looked at me, his face grim but resolved. Then we go, together. As we left Facility 4, stepping back into the unnatural blue light, I realized with perfect clarity that neither of us expected to survive this mission. But some things were worth dying for. Stopping what was coming through that doorway was one of them. The journey to the main reactor complex was a nightmare. The very air seemed charged with energy, making our skin prickle and hair stand on end. The blue beam had expanded, creating a dome of light that covered the entire facility. Within this dome, reality itself seemed to waver and distort. Shadows moved independently of their owners. Objects appeared to be in two places at once. Time felt stretched and compressed simultaneously. Do you feel that? Ivan asked as we approached the administration building. Like we're being watched from every direction. I felt it. Eyes that weren't eyes, observing us from dimensions we couldn't perceive. The pressure in my head had become a constant, throbbing pain. The visions now so frequent they blended with reality. The administration building's entrance was unguarded, its doors hanging open. Inside, emergency lighting cast long shadows across empty corridors. The place had been evacuated in haste. Chairs overturned, papers scattered. A single shoe lying in the middle of a hallway. We followed the signs to the reactor control room, guided by the map from the folder. Along the way, we encountered more evidence of violence. Blood smears on walls, bullet holes, deep gouges in the metal doors. But no bodies. Whatever had attacked here had taken the victims. The control room was on the 3rd floor, connected to Reactor 4 by an enclosed bridge. As we climbed the stairs, another tremor rocked the building, the most violent yet. The structure groaned under the stress, pipes bursting in the walls, ceiling tiles crashing down around us. It's accelerating, I said, knowing it with certainty. The doorway is almost fully open. We reached the control room to find it in disarray but intact. Unlike Facility 4, there were no bodies here. Just abandoned workstations and monitoring equipment, still actively displaying readings from the reactor. The wall of windows facing the reactor building provided a clear view of the source of the blue beam. A circular opening in the roof directly above the reactor core, the light shooting upward with blinding intensity. Now what? Ivan asked, gesturing to the bewildering array of controls. I consulted the protocol document from the safe. It outlined a precise sequence of actions meant to trigger a specific type of failure in the reactor's cooling system. This wasn't a simple meltdown, but a carefully calculated disruption that would create an electromagnetic pulse of particular frequency, one that might destabilize the artifact and collapse the doorway. "We need to access the primary cooling control systems," I said, searching the consoles. "Then override the safety protocols and initiate a controlled power surge." Ivan looked over the document. "This says we need authorization codes from the chief engineer. The colonel's keycard should override that requirement." I inserted the card into a slot on the main console. The screen flashed, then prompted for a secondary authentication code. "Damn it," I muttered. "We need another code." Ivan was already searching the room, rifling through drawers and checking the pockets of abandoned lab coats. Nothing here. Another tremor, stronger than the last. Through the windows, we could see the blue beam fluctuating, expanding and contracting in a rhythm that matched the tremors. Each pulse sent waves of dizziness washing over me. "There!" Ivan pointed to a small office adjoining the control room. "Chief Engineer" was stenciled on the door. The office was locked, but a few well-placed kicks from Ivan's heavy boot splintered the frame. Inside, we found a desk with a nameplate reading Valery Legasov, Chief Engineer. The contents had been hastily cleared, but taped to the underside of a drawer, we discovered a small envelope. Inside was a card with a series of numbers, the authentication codes. They left contingency measures, I realized. They knew this might happen. We returned to the main console. I entered the codes, and the system granted access to the cooling controls. Following the protocol document, I began to input the commands that would trigger the specific sequence of failures. "Warning, critical safety override initiated," the computer announced in a mechanical voice. "Reactor destabilization sequence will commence in 10 minutes. Evacuation procedures must be implemented immediately." 10 minutes, Ivan echoed. "Is that enough time for us to get clear?" We both knew the answer. Even if we ran, we wouldn't get far enough to escape the immediate effects of the reactor failure. And that was assuming nothing tried to stop us. "Go," I told him. "Get as far as you can. One of us should survive to tell what happened here." Ivan shook his head. "We finished this together, Nikolai. Besides," he gestured to his wounded leg, "I wouldn't get far." Another violent tremor shook the building, nearly knocking us off our feet. Through the windows, we saw something emerging from the blue beam, a massive shape, indistinct and shifting, like a hole in reality slowly taking form. The sight of it sent waves of primal terror through me. "It's coming through," I whispered. The door to the control room burst open. Karpov stood there, but he wasn't alone. Behind him were others, plant workers, soldiers, scientists, all with the same black eyes and unnatural stillness. Their skin had a translucent quality, as if they were becoming less solid, less human. "Stop what you are doing," the chorus of voices commanded. Ivan raised his rifle, positioning himself between me and the transformed humans. "Finish it, Nikolai." I turned back to the console, racing to complete the final sequence. The possessed humans surged forward. Ivan opened fire, the shots deafeningly loud in the confined space. 2 of the figures fell, but the others kept coming, moving within human speed. One reached Ivan, grabbing his rifle barrel and twisting it aside with impossible strength. Another latched onto his arm, its touch causing Ivan's skin to blacken and wither. He screamed in agony but continued fighting, drawing his knife and plunging it into his attacker's eye. I completed the sequence, hitting the final command to initiate the reactor destabilization. The console locked, a countdown appearing on the screen. 8:47, 8:46, 8:45. "It's done!" I shouted, turning to help Ivan. He was surrounded, 3 of the possessed humans holding him down, while Karpov approached, hand extended. "Run!" Ivan yelled, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. "Tell the world!" I hesitated, unwilling to abandon my comrade. but Ivan's eyes met mine, his expression resolute. "Go, Nikolai!" That's an order. In that moment, I made a choice I've regretted every day since. I ran, past the struggling figures, through the door, down the corridor toward the stairs. Behind me, Ivan's scream cut off abruptly. I raced down the stairwell, my boots slipping on the metal steps. Above me, I heard doors slamming open, the possessed humans in pursuit. The countdown was at 7:30. I needed to put as much distance as possible between myself and the reactor before detonation. I burst out of the administration building into the unnatural blue twilight. The beam had expanded further, the shape within it more distinct now. A vast, writhing mass of darkness and light intertwined, reaching down toward the reactor building like a hand descending from another world. I ran toward the perimeter fence, each step seeming to take enormous effort, as if the air itself had become viscous. Behind me, the possessed humans emerged from the building, moving in that unnaturally fluid way, gaining on me despite my head start. The pressure in my skull reached a crescendo, and a new vision overwhelmed me, not of the past or present, but of what was about to happen. I saw the reactor core destabilizing, the specific harmonics of its failure resonating with the artifact beneath. I saw the doorway fluctuating, the entity caught halfway through, neither here nor there. And I saw the chain reaction that would follow, a pulse of energy unlike anything humanity had witnessed before. The vision was so vivid, so all-consuming, that I didn't see the figure step out from behind the storage shed until I collided with it. I fell backward, scrambling to get up to continue running. Then I froze. Karpov? But it wasn't the possessed Karpov I'd seen in the control room. This Karpov looked fully human, his eyes normal, his skin healthy. He wore the same uniform he'd had on when we'd started our journey, now torn and bloodied. "Petrov," he said, his voice his own. "You need to get up. We don't have much time." "How?" I began, confused. "I saw you. You were one of them." "Not me," he replied, helping me to my feet. "Something wearing my face. A projection, a copy. The real me has been hiding, watching, waiting for my chance to act." I had no time to question his story. The possessed humans were closing in, and the countdown in my head told me we had less than 5 minutes. "We need to run," I said. "Now." Together we sprinted toward the perimeter, the strange atmospheric resistance lessening as we got further from the reactor. Behind us, the blue beam began to pulse erratically, expanding and contracting in violent spasms. The ground shook continuously now, the tremors merging into one constant vibration. We reached the fence as the first visible signs of reactor destabilization appeared, power surges causing lights throughout the complex to flare and die, steam venting from emergency release valves, the ominous sound of metal straining under extreme pressure. "Through here," Karpov said, indicating a section of fence that had been cut open. We slipped through and continued running into the forest beyond. We had barely made it 100 meters when the world behind us exploded in light and sound. The shock wave hit us like a physical blow, lifting us off our feet and hurling us forward. I slammed into a tree, the impact knocking the breath from my lungs and the consciousness from my mind. My last image before blackness took me was of the blue beam collapsing in on itself, the doorway it had created imploding with a silent flash that seared itself into my retinas. And in that final moment, I heard, or perhaps felt, a scream of rage and frustration from the entity that had almost crossed over. A scream that promised this wasn't over, that it would find another way, that it would return. April 26, 1986. I was having breakfast in my small apartment in Minsk when I heard the news. There had been an accident at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. Reactor 4 had experienced a catastrophic failure. They called it a safety test gone wrong, an operator error, a design flaw. They evacuated Pripyat, established an exclusion zone, sent in liquidators to clean up the radioactive debris. But I knew the truth. I recognized the date immediately, exactly 6 years from the day we had temporarily closed the doorway. I knew this was no accident. I never saw Karpov again after that night. We were separated in the chaos that followed. I spent 3 days wandering delirious through the frozen forests before a military patrol found me. I was debriefed, sworn to secrecy, then quietly discharged from service on medical grounds. The official story was that our transport had been attacked by anti-Soviet partisans. No mention of the crate, the entity, or what happened at Facility 4. The Sokolov twins survived. They were picked up from the village clinic and similarly discharged. Mikhail wrote to me once, years later. Dmitri had never fully recovered from his wound, the arm remaining partially paralyzed. They lived together in Odessa, trying to forget. We never spoke of that January mission. Ivan was listed as killed in action. No body was ever recovered. No surprise there. For 6 years I've lived with the knowledge that we had only bought time, not victory. The entity, or entities, would find another way. The artifact beneath Reactor 4 would eventually be reactivated. The doorway would open again. And now it has happened. I've been watching the news reports carefully. They don't match what I know about nuclear accidents. The color of the fire, the pattern of radiation spread, the strange phenomena reported by the first responders before communications were cut off. All consistent with what we experienced in 1980. Last night, I received a letter. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 7 rules. Do not return to the exclusion zone under any circumstances. If you hear someone calling your name who sounds like Ivan, ignore it. It is not him. If you dream of blue light, wake yourself immediately. If you notice black liquid seeping from your walls, burn the house and run. If you find yourself unable to cast a shadow, your time is nearly up. When they offer you transformation, refuse. Death is preferable. Tell no one the full truth until you are certain you are dying. At the bottom, a familiar signature, Lieutenant Alexei Karpov. Today I noticed I no longer cast a shadow in certain kinds of light, and there's a spot on my bedroom wall that feels damp to the touch but appears dry. I've waited too long to tell this story. Perhaps by sharing it, I can warn others of what's coming. The entity's promise wasn't false. It has found another way. The doorway is open again, and this time, I fear there is no one left who knows how to close it. If you're reading this, and you notice the light changing around you, taking on a blue tinge, run. If you hear whispers from empty rooms, or find yourself remembering things that never happened, hide. And if you're ever ordered to transport a sealed crate without being told what's inside, refuse, no matter the consequences. Refuse, and live. This is Nikolai Petrov, former corporal of the Soviet Army, signing off for the last time. May God have mercy on us all.